Hello everyone, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Yep, as you probably have guessed, we're going to be upgrading the horn on our 2021 GT Mustang. So let's get started. And for our very first step, we need to focus on disconnecting the negative terminal from the battery. So we'll go ahead and take out these 3 retaining clips for the battery cover. And see if I get number 2 out, and then number 3. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and lift up the battery cover and go ahead and pull that right out. And we'll go ahead and set that aside. Now let's go ahead and take a 10mm socket and a socket wrench. And go ahead and take out this one nut. And see if we can get this completely unscrewed. And almost there. There we go. And we'll go ahead and lift that cable up, put it aside. And let's go ahead and drop the nut as well. And that's why we always keep a magnet on hand. And we'll go ahead and put the nut right back on the stud just so we don't lose it again. Now let's go ahead and work our way to the driver's side and loosen up the lug nuts on our front wheel. And it's going to require a 21mm socket and a breaker bar. And the whole idea is we just want to loosen these up while it's still on the ground. So there's number 2, and 3, 4, and 5. Now let's go ahead and go under the vehicle. Let's see if I can get a good spot. And I'm trying to do this without too much glare on the screen because I know it's kind of annoying. So right there, you're going to see an arrow right on the plastic trim. That's where we're going to start putting the servicing jack because that's where it's going to go right up on against the metal. So we'll get the jack right under there. And that looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and start lifting it up. And that looks like it's dead center. So now let's go ahead and lift the vehicle all the way up. Bear with me. And that seems high enough. So now let's go ahead and put the jack stand. Put the pin in there as well so that we know it's not going to move. And there we go. And we'll very gently lower it down. And I'm also going to leave the service jack in place just as a backup. So you can pretty much see our setup right now. We're pretty safe. And all the weight is on the jack stand, not the service jack. But it's just there as a backup. So overall, it looks pretty good. I think we're safe to move forward. So now let's go ahead and remove the lug nuts and the wheel. So I'll take that 21mm socket and go ahead and unscrew all these lug nuts. Now if it's still a little tight, you can go ahead and grab an impact wrench or you can grab a regular wrench and take these right out. So there's number 4, 5. And now let's go ahead and get a good pull and go ahead and take this wheel off. Very nice. So now let me go ahead and bring the camera in because we need to focus on removing the splash shield. So it goes all the way around this wheel well, and there's quite a few retainers in there that we're going to have to take out. And you can see it's all the way around, and see, move the camera down a little more. And there's a few down here as well, and we're going to go through every one of these. So we'll go ahead and take our trim removal tool, and we'll go ahead and start with the very front. And see if I can pry that one out. Very nice. And there's number 1. And pretty much you do the rest the exact same way. So there's number 2. And that should pop right out. So far that looked professional. And that didn't. And number 4, all you gotta do is press that one in and it pulls right out. There's going 2 of them where you have to actually press in. And that's number 5. Let's go over to the left or that one as well. Press that one in. And then pull. So there's 6. Now let's go ahead and work upward. There we go. And there's number 7. And a little bit further in. Number 8, and there's supposed to be 9 in that corner, but that one is missing. And then number 10. And then right here I have a splash guard or a mud flap, so I'm going to need a Phillips screwdriver. But for many of you, you just go ahead and take that off the same retaining pins. And now we got 2 screws out. That mud flap should come right off. There we go. Now let's go ahead and take out that one retaining clip. And there's one right under the vehicle as well. And that's going to be our last one. So that was pretty easy. Now let's go ahead and remove the fender splash shield. And this pretty much falls right out. And I'll go ahead and bend it a little bit just so I don't scratch anything. And there we go. We'll go ahead and set that aside. Now let's go ahead and bring the camera in and show you what we're going to be focusing on. So you see the 2 horns right there? Well, we're going to add this 3rd one right there. That's actually a perfect spot, and I think that's going to work out beautifully. That's all by coincidence. That was not by design. That was just a lucky guess. So now I'll go ahead and grab some 80 grit sandpaper and clean up that one little area. I want to go ahead and have some exposed metal because I'm going to go ahead and hook the ground right there. And that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and make sure there's no debris left. So we'll take some rubbing alcohol and a microfiber cloth. Just pretty much get all that dust left behind. We want a nice clean surface. And that looks pretty good. So now let me go ahead and grab our new horn, and you're going to see 2 terminals. And let's see. Yep, one at the top and one at the bottom. The one at the bottom is going to be our ground, and that's where we're going to be hooking to that bare metal right there. And what's also very nice is that this horn came with its own bolt, and it happens to be a perfect size. So that's what we're going to be doing. So let's go ahead and take some thread locking compound, and I want to go ahead and put a little bit on the nut it came with. I want to make sure when this thing is tight, it's going to stay tight. And then we'll go ahead and throw that nut right in that little slotted area. Now this area, it was a little difficult for me because I did have a camera there, but we went ahead and made it work. So go ahead and start the threads, and then we'll take a 14mm socket and socket wrench and go ahead and tighten it up. And we want to make it as snug as possible. And yep, that felt pretty good. Bring the camera in a little bit more. That way you can see a little better look at how it looks. So far it looks pretty good, looks pretty sturdy. And I think that's going to work out very nicely. So now let's go ahead and go into the garage and go ahead and set up our wiring harness. This is the one that came with the horn. Now it does have our power cable right here, this nice long red one, and this is a 14 gauge wire. Now unfortunately it's not long enough, so we're going to go ahead and have to do a little alteration on that one. And then we have two leads right here, and that's what the OEM horn goes to, which I'm going to show you all of this. Now the one item we did purchase that was in addition was this pigtail setup. This allows two horns to be connected to one connector, and this is exactly what we need to make a nice clean setup, as well as we can make it reversible if we ever have to backtrack. So right now I'm going to show you everything we're going to do. So let's go ahead and start with prepping the harness. And I'll start by taking a little pick set, and we need to go ahead and disconnect that hot wire or the power wire from the fuse block. And that pick is against that latch, so it pulls right out. So right now we went ahead and disconnected it. We didn't break or cut anything, we just went ahead and disconnected it. So now let's go ahead and focus on the control wire for the relay. It's a white and blue wire, as you can see right here. And we're going to go ahead and hook it or connect it to one of the ends of the pigtails. And that's going to be a black and red wire. So we're going to go ahead and trim off that end of the pigtail, and then we're only going to do one of them. There we go, and we'll go ahead and start stripping it back. So when we actuate the horn, it's going to actuate the relay, which is going to power the big horn itself. And of course, all we're doing is stripping all the sheathing back. That way we can go ahead and crimp these two cables together. Now, if you want, you can use butt connectors. I'm just using terminal connectors just because that's what I had available, and it's just convenient. And as you can see, those slid right on. White was your negative, blue was your positive. And so far, it looks really good. I think we're ready to install this. Now I'll go ahead and move my way to the vehicle, and we'll go ahead and start by installing the yellow wire on the horn. That's basically your positive or your power wire for the horn. And that goes straight from the relay. Now I need to find a spot for this relay. Well, actually, out of pure dumb luck, that looks like a good spot right there. So let's go ahead and grab our trim wheel tool, go ahead and pry that out. And it looks like it's going to fit very well. And that actually, that connection looks like almost like a Christmas tree, so that's going to hold very nicely. So we'll get our relay in there. Doing this one-handed, bear with me. And that actually fits like a glove. That looks very nice. So now let's go ahead and take our power wire that goes to our horn, and we're going to go ahead and feed that upward. We're going to pretty much set that right on top where the hood is, just for now. And let's go ahead and disconnect the OEM plug to our horn. And now let's go ahead and install our pigtail. So one side that we didn't cut off goes in there, and the other end gets plugged right where the OEM connector is. And that fits very nicely. That looks beautiful. And now all pretty much it's doing is just cleanup work in this one little area. So all we have to do is just go ahead and secure the wiring to pretty much any holes or any areas we can. So we'll take some zip ties, and we'll go ahead and pretty much zip tie everything down and make it nice and pretty. And the whole idea is I don't want any of this wire flapping away while we're driving, and you should pretty much want to make all your work look really good. And that looks pretty good, looks pretty sturdy. So now I'll grab some loom tubing. I had some left over from a previous project, and we're going to use this to go ahead and surround the power wire to provide a little bit of protection as we're running it near the radiator. And you really can't see it right now, but I'm putting the loom tubing around the power wire on the top side, and I'm feeding it down all the way to where the relay is. And that's all I'm doing, just pretty much surrounding it and feeding it all the way down. And almost there. Looks pretty good. Now let's go ahead and zip tie that down as well. We're just going to go ahead and secure it. So it's not only for appearance, but it's also for a little bit of protection. And of course, we're going to cut off the excess zip ties. And that looks pretty good. So just do one little camera overview, just give you a little setup before we move on. That's what it looks like as far as our installation. It's held on pretty well. It's pointed slightly downward just to keep water out of it. And it looks like all of our wiring is secure and nothing's going to get snagged. So let's go ahead and keep moving forward. So now let's go and remove the radiator sight shield. And this is held on by 8 retaining clips, so you'll need a trim wheel tool, and these pop out very similar to your Fender splash guard. And there's number 4, 5, 6, 7, and last one, number 8. And this just lifts right out. So now we have a nice area so we can go ahead and feed all that loom tubing and our wiring through. So pretty much anytime you see our wiring next to another wire, I'm going to zip tie them together, just pretty much provide an area so it can secure to and not wobble in the wind. And of course, always cut away the excess zip ties. So now let's go ahead and zoom in and focus on this power wire a little bit more. And off camera, I added those same terminals, I crimped on new ones, just so I can add an extension to this power wire. And I'm going to go ahead and connect them together and put a little heat shrink tubing over it just to provide a little bit of waterproof protection. Now, unfortunately, we did have to extend this power wire because it just was a few feet too short. Now, at this point, you can take a heat gun to go ahead and shrink your heat shrink. I just went ahead and used a lighter just because that was pretty much what I had convenient at the time. And that looks pretty good. Looks pretty solid. And then we'll continue running our loom tubing over it. And this pretty much not only provide protection, but also a little bit of nice little cosmetic little addition. And that looks pretty good right there. So we're going to grab 2 zip tie mounts, and we're going to install these right on the radiator brackets. So grab some rubbing alcohol, clean the surface, of course. And we're going to do this underneath. Looks pretty good. Now let's go and install those zip tie mounts, and I went ahead and put a zip tie on it, just made it easier. And do another one on this side as well. And again, they're going to be installed underneath the radiator mounts, so you're not going to be able to see them, but it should hold very nicely. And then we'll go ahead and take our little excess amount over here. We're going to go ahead and go to this fuse box. So we've got the measurement right. Now let's go ahead and cut it away. And we'll get the loom tubing as well. And there we go. So now we got the exact length we need. Next, let's go ahead and reinstall that one wire we took out earlier with that pick set. And it should slide right back in and clip back in place. Very nice, nice and secure. And of course, I'm going to use a little excess loom tubing just to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing. So now let's go ahead and grab our 10mm socket and socket wrench, and we're going to take off the first nut on the first stud. Now all 3 of those terminals are hot all the time. This battery junction box, that's where all 3 of them are hot. I'm just choosing the first one just out of convenience. And then we'll go ahead and take that one wire that came out of our fuse block. Now that's already pre-terminaled, so all we got to do is put it right on the stud, put the nut right back down, tighten it down. And this, you want to make sure it's nice and snug. Very nice. And then we'll go ahead and run the lube tubing down a little bit. And for now, I'm just going to leave the fuse block right there just for now. And of course, we're going to connect the other side to that power wire that goes to the horn. And same thing as earlier, I went ahead and put terminals on it as well as put some heat shrink tubing. So we'll go ahead and make sure we shrink it down. And then we'll go ahead and apply our loom tubing around the power wire and go ahead and route it around. We want to make sure it doesn't get snagged on anything, and it actually looks pretty good. And we'll go ahead and zip tie everything down. Snip away the excess. One more. There we go. And now let's go ahead and reinstall our radiator sight shield. And this installs much quicker than it is removal. So all you gotta do is put it in place and just put all 8 of those pins back where their normal positions are. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, and last one, number 8. Very nice. And let's continue buttoning everything up. Let's go ahead and install our Fender splash shield. So all I gotta do is pretty much get it in place. I'll try not to block the camera too much. And everything should pretty much just set in there just until you pretty much get your pins where you need to be them. So there we go, it's just sitting in there. Now let's go and install all those retaining clips. Now this one, again, I have a mud flap or a splash guard there, so that's what I'm going to put back in its same spot. So this is a Phillips screwdriver for me, but for majority of you, you won't need any of that. And we'll go ahead and snug those up. And we'll get the top one. Very nice. And pretty much we're putting every one of those retaining clips right back in their original positions. And as we're working our way around, we do have to pretty much line everything up, but it's pretty easy. And now we're getting to the front. There we go. We'll get those big boys in place and those push right in. And then we'll go under the vehicle to get our last one. Same thing, that presses right in. Perfect. And now let's go and install our wheel and lug nuts. So using a little bit of lifting strength, there we go. And we'll go ahead and snug up all these lug nuts. And we're not going to overly tighten them, we're just going to make them as snug as possible. So that looks pretty good. So now let's go ahead and lift up our vehicle, remove our jack stand, and go ahead and gently lower it down. And that looks pretty good. And now we'll grab a torque wrench, and we're going to set it to 150 foot-pounds, and we're going to torque all these lug nuts down in a star pattern. So we'll go ahead and start with the top, of course. And we'll keep going till we hear beep. So there's 1, there's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're almost done. So let's go ahead and connect our negative terminal back. So go ahead and put that one cable back on the stud, put that nut right back on. Grab our 10mm socket wrench and go ahead and snug that up. And there we go. And we'll go ahead and reinstall our battery cover, and this just slides right back in. And yep, looks pretty good. And we'll go ahead and install those 3 retaining clips. And these just pretty much twist right back in place. And of course this has a hood strut, so I'll just snap that back in. And now the moment of truth, we're going to go ahead and do a sound test. 20 feet away with the OEM setup first. Alright, so that's a pretty good baseline, about 96 decibels. So now we're going to go back under the hood and install that fuse in the fuse block for the horn. This should go ahead and power it now. And now, just as an FYI, I am going to secure this later on after the tests are done. So let's go ahead and see how this sounds. 20 feet away, new horn. Yeah, that's definitely a difference. Let's move in a little bit closer. Let's go to 15 feet, OEM. All right, pretty similar. Aftermarket horn. All right, let's go ahead and bring it in to 10 feet, OEM. Okay, slightly louder. All right, last test. This is going to be the new setup at 10 feet. Yeah, definitely a noticeable difference. About 4 to 5 decimals, which is really nice. It sounds a lot louder. It's definitely more effective. Well, if you found this video helpful or at least entertaining, please like and subscribe.